Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de a fun one for me, of course, which is, does one have to be a minimalist, or at least aspiring to be in that vein, in order to achieve fire? Hey, Zampak here. I don't know if you can tell, but I genuinely enjoy being frugal. I mean, there's just something joyful in getting a good deal, right? Of course, I'm pretty sure all this has to do with, my limited resources during that whole early conditioning childhood period of my life, right? I think it makes total sense that I like bargains because that is what I have observed my folks chase all their lives. Conversely, I can see how if someone grows up as a trust fund baby or never had to consider the weight of the money being spent, well, then why would they care a lick about getting a good deal? After all, they've never been denied anything they wanted, right? But seeing as how I think the main point of life is overcoming obstacles, I actually believe that a lack of friction in the trust fund baby's case actually works against them in terms of the pursuit of being general happiness, right? So while maybe having a scrappy upbringing seems harder, the increase in sense of accomplishment associated with being frugal can actually make one happier than without. Now, all of that rant leads to this, which is frugality leads easily into minimalism as far as most people are concerned, but aren't exactly the same things, right? So since I love frugality, do I also love minimalism? And often I see minimalism tied, tightly bound to the achievement of fire, right? So today I'll talk about whether I agree with that or not, and of course my reasoning and context behind it all. Anyway, if you're intrigued by what I might say, please subscribe, like, comment, share, and all that social media buzzwords or whatever, because I am rich enough for me. I'll be great regardless. So I think naturally minimalism does align with fire, right? After all, it is the antithesis of rampant consumerism, right? Since minimalism designed that one keeps, well, a minimum of belongings at any given time, right? It basically forces almost every purchasing decision to be an intentional one. Now, I suppose technically a rich and spendy person can still be a minimalist even if they buy all the items of the world because they can simply toss all the old stuff and keep a minimal amount of stuff, right? But honestly, that's an incredible edge case, so I'm going to ignore that. For the vast majority of people who doesn't have infinite resources to play with, the effective mindset of minimalism that will drive it becomes, since you can't have that much stuff, make sure every single thing you actually buy or own is really something you need, right? Rather than simply something to buy and toss soon afterwards. It is this idea of purchasing things that are very specifically intentional that I think is helpful for achieving fire, right? You do that because at some point, through whatever your process may be, the conclusion should be that the things that you own could potentially become or feels like burdens rather than joys, right? That is the real reason to not own too much crap. Let's face it, we Americans at least, we buy a ton of, well, crap. Anything that you don't reuse more than 5 times or haven't touched in a year easily qualifies as, well, crap. I'm guilty of this myself, so I'm sure you are too. Look at your closet or basement and think about how many of the things just qualifies my previous statement. Now, where does minimalism not fit the fire mindset then, if any such scenarios exist? I'd argue these scenarios definitely exist, okay? Minimalism taken by itself can feel sometimes like, let's call it a little cultish, okay? Culty. I mean, there's a reason why I don't call myself a minimalist, okay? I call myself an efficiencyist instead. I got another video on that on this channel. I'm not going to link it because you can just search my channel if you really want to look at it, okay? My point is, for the regular folks, it can actually get more expensive to own a very small amount of items at any given time. I get not wanting a whole garage full of junk that most Americans hold on to for a lifetime and never ever use and simply becomes trash. But there is zero reasons not to buy in bulk consumable items such as toilet paper or Costco levels of steak if one has a freezer space for it. This is really where being frugal and being minimalist diverge, right? Minimalism can feel culty because, I joke those guys all want to hang out in a bright white room without any furniture in it just for the looks, right? Heck, I'm not even against that whole bare minimum type of aesthetic, right? But it is more fun to think about than to live in because, furnitures and things that we will have in our regular lives, they exist for usually a reason of utility and comfort, right? We human beings have figured that stuff out like ages ago, like hundreds of years ago. Most standard things that you buy do serve a purpose to make ourselves, more efficient, right? Not just, to not hoard. So then, do I think that in general minimalism actually helps out or is a requirement for FIRE? I actually would lean towards a yes on this question still, right? So it is not the most efficient, but it is still a very anti-lifestyle creep type of ideology that most people can understand and possibly accept even more easily than FIRE in general, right? Heck, even the parts that I object to, such as the lack of efficiency and the weird culty single color, maybe just white in a room kind of aesthetics, they even can work to attract more people into to becoming fans, right? After all, Kanye supposedly had an all-white room with no furniture in it, and he's a celebrity, and most people like to follow those kind of celebrity morons around, right? So that's what's cool, right? I don't really care how most people get into a certain ideology so long as they get hooked into it, right? So I do think that minimalism has an easier hook. And really what I love about the ideology is that it takes most Americans out of the world where they're bombarded with the impulse to buy, to fill that insatiable god hole, or whatever you want to call it. Let's be clear. The most important realization that I want people to reach before they ever consider FIRE is that their relationship, what their relationship is like with material possessions. And that's not something that I can tell anyone, right? They have to realize it for themselves. What is your stuff, really? Do they bring you joy all the time, or do they feel like a weight on your shoulders, as they tend to do, as most things tend to do? Okay, think about that. So, in conclusion, I doubt I will ever get to a point where I would call myself a minimalist because I have a closet full of clothes and I don't live in a tiny home by any measure. However, I do understand well that the accumulation of more and more stuff should not be an end goal for any reasonable human being, right? Minimalism doesn't really exactly equal frugality, and therefore doesn't directly translate into FIRE. However, it does usually help more people control their common consumerist urges, and I can't argue with that. Sure, if everybody suddenly became a minimalist, the economy would collapse, but honestly, there's no chance of that anywhere in the world, right? Not while most people are obviously and obliviously running themselves ragged in a rat race, at least, okay? Do you agree? Disagree? Please let me have it in the comments below. Or not. Cheers. A la prochaine.